it was the start of the war. That night, America and Britain dropped 50 cruise missiles on Kabul. You can hear a cruise missile from 20 miles away. These were coming within a quarter of a mile of the prison. I had covered wars before, and I don't know why it had not occurred to me then, but it certainly occurred to me that night. These bombs don't discriminate. There's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide. Civilian, military, man, woman, child, these bombs cannot tell the difference. I'm going to be blown apart by a British bomb. I've got no doubt Tony Blair will blame the Taliban, and that will be the end of that. And it was truly terrifying. And I also thought, there is no way the Taliban will let me go now. Absolutely no way at all. And the next morning, there was a knock on my door, and I was told, please, there is a vehicle outside. We are going to release you. I couldn't believe it. But sure enough, there was a vehicle. They put me in it. We drove down from Kabul, through Jalalabad, down to Torkham, and eventually, after some shenanigans, I was handed over to the Pakistan authorities. And as I walked back across no man's land, the camera lights went up and the journalists started shouting, "How did the Taliban treat you?" And in truth, up until the point that I was released, I still didn't trust them 1 inch. And I thought everything that they were trying to do had a hidden motive. It was only at the point that they released me that I thought, you know what, they were quite an honourable bunch of guys. So when this journalist shouted at me, "How did the Taliban treat you?" I thought for a while, and then I said, "With respect and courtesy." This is not what the Western media wanted. The Western media wanted Abu Ghraib tales. They wanted abuse, rape, torture. They wanted to see scars. They wanted to see tears. There was nothing I could give them other than the truth. And sadly, for some people, the truth is never enough. When I got back to London, about 2 weeks later, one of my guides on the Pakistan side called me, and he said, "Madam, the village that you visited has been bombed by the Americans." That was the village Karma, which is smaller than this hall we're in now. And I said, "Look, Pasha, I know these terrible things happen in the fog of war. And it's awful, but these accidents do happen." And he said, "But madam, how can you accidentally bomb a village the size of Karma 3 days running?" Now then, the Americans were telling us all about their strategic strikes, their surgical strikes, their B-52 bombers coming at 30,000 feet. Karma wouldn't have even looked like a dot from 30,000 feet. It was quite clear to me that this was indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas. And in many ways, the Taliban were to blame because they kicked out all of the Western journalists. Whatever you think about journalists, we do have our functions and our role. We are the eyes, the ears, the witnesses. And by kicking out all of the Western journalists, they ensured that Britain and America could and would bomb indiscriminately across the country, slaughtering innocent civilians, which they did. That propelled me into the anti-war movement and made me become very, very active as an anti-war campaigner. At that same time, I remembered the promise that I had given to the religious cleric. And I thought, well, against all the odds, they kept their word. While they hung on to the Christians, they let me go. And really, I should keep my promise now. And I started to read the Quran. Very soon, groups of Muslims found out, and somebody gave me a wonderful English translation by A. Yusuf Ali with an index in the back. So I thought, great, I'll get this over and done with very quickly. I'm going to cherry pick and I'm going to read all about the subjugation and oppression of women and what promotes people to slam planes into towers. So I started cherry picking and going through all the women's issues. And then I had other Islamic literature to support my reading of the Quran. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The Quran makes it perfectly clear, crystal clear, no two ways about it. Women are equal in spirituality, worth, and education. Furthermore, the first convert to Islam was a woman. The first martyr to Islam was a woman. Women played major roles right from day one in Islam. They fought alongside the men. The Prophet, peace be upon him, picked out one particular woman and singled her out for praise during a battle, the Battle of Ehud, and he said, everywhere I looked, this woman was there, protecting me, fighting with me, fighting alongside me. I thought, where have we got this idea that women are oppressed and subjugated? Where do we get it from? Who put the poison in our minds? I then looked at property rights, inheritance rights, divorce rights. What's yours is yours, what's his is half of yours. Yeah, brilliant. Much of it could have been written by a Californian lawyer. In fact, this is from where they probably get their inspiration. All these tales in the tabloids about the superstars having prenuptial contracts and teams of lawyers drawing up and thrashing out these prenuptial contracts, they were available to Muslim women from day one. And so I began to see Islam in a totally different light. And I thought, yes, okay, this is great, but what are the people like? And so I went out into the Muslim communities, specifically to meet the sisters. And it didn't matter where I went in the world, whether it was Pakistan, or whether it was Saudi, or Canada, or America, or Australia, and now New Zealand. The Muslim women I have met, whether they have been formally educated or not, are resilient, strong, politicized, internationally aware, multi-skilled, multi-talented. A few years ago, I would have looked in this room and picked out everyone wearing a hijab, and I would have thought, oh, look at those poor, oppressed women. How did they manage to sneak out of the home to come here? Now I'm looking and I'm trying to work out who is the engineer, who is the doctor, who is the lawyer, who is the teacher, who is doing the PhD, who's doing the MA, who's raising kids at the same time, supporting their man, running a business, a charity, who is the backbone of the community. I see incredibly diverse women. And I remember a sister in Canada who said to me, Yvonne, my head might be covered, but my mind is not. And the most valuable lesson that I learned from the sisters that I met is never ever again will I judge a person's freedoms and liberties by the length of their skirt. So this was wonderful. The other thing that I learned about the Muslim community is it has an incredibly gossipy network. And I could visit somebody in Glasgow one day, and by the next morning I'd get a phone call from somebody in Karachi saying